Hello, so today I have a game for you in my Kolberg, which was a tier 3 German cruiser, and it's another ship that I've recently got that I kind of keep having average games, and it's a lot like the New York in that respect. This video kind of shows you why I've been having average games, but I'm also going to talk a bit about plunging fire and immunity zones, in respect to the Kolberg. Anyway, we are on the Big Race map, which is a pretty common low tier map, and we've spotted a Myogi. Now the Kolberg's actually got very short range. I believe it's about 9.3ish normally, but I've got advanced firing training on my captain, which means I can go up to about 10.9 kilometers. So this Myogi is just within my maximum range. This is the cruiser with the lowest range at tier 3, and it is actually a fairly big weakness on this ship that makes up for it by having, well, it doesn't really, it's got the same armament as the Dresden at tier 2, which is pretty good. Lots of 4-inch shells that fire very quickly and damage all adds up, but they have quite weak, well, armor penetration, I suppose. Very good armor piercing shells if they penetrate, but they bounce off fairly thin armour at times. Well, that Myogi is turning away from me, but it appears to be the only enemy ship at this end of the map, and you see it's taken a few hits from myself and my allies, but my team hasn't really arrived to back me up yet. Oh, and here's a Wakatake, so since I'm a cruiser I switch to firing at it, start another fire on the Myogi, so hopefully it's taking a fair bit of damage. And get a decent broadside into the Wakatake there. Miss, oh no, just get a few hits with my second broadside. That's pop smoke, so I've really lost contact with it. But I did maybe 1500 damage. And a Wakatake can't really, oh no. Sorry friendly St. Louis, I didn't see it till it was far too late. So that was unfortunate, but let's just forget about that. Fire a few shots at the Myogi just to distract myself, and then I realise, oh, actually, if you look at the minimap, there's a destroyer right in front of me. So we'll go back and shoot away at this Dursky, and unfortunately this Dursky is very close to us, and the Dursky is quite dangerous at close ranges. So went hard to port there and managed to avoid its torpedoes. Hopefully that was all of its torpedoes, because I'm probably not going to have enough speed to do as... Oh no. Just as I was talking, it sounds like I took a big hit from the Myogi, assisted our penetration, took away about 2/3 of my health. Oh, so this isn't going great for me. But I did manage to sink the Dursky. The first enemy ship sank by our team. So, well, our team's one ship up now, but I've taken a bit of a beating, haven't had a great game so far. Firing away at St. Louis, the American tier 3 cruiser, and I'm doing alright here. I fired some high explosive broadsides there, started a fire, did about 1400 damage. I switched to armour piercing at fairly long range, and well, I miss. I believe I got an over penetration with my first broadside, and again I'm just not aiming very well. All my hits there bounced. And there, it seems like we bounced again. Another over penetration and a few bounces. 600 damage is looking pretty decent. 690, could be better, but not awful. Missed. Those shots look pretty good. 2000 damage. And 1900 damage. And I've switched to high explosive because I'm getting a bit disappointed with my damage levels there. I immediately do 350, 396, 1200, and back to armour piercing. I think we got 792 there, but that might have been with high explosive. And, well, island's in the way, so I can't look anymore. So that was a bit disappointing, to be honest. I managed to sink the St. Louis because of a fire I started, but my armour piercing shells here were just very unreliable. But I mean, when I was firing high explosive, they also did next to no damage, just because, well, the high explosive shells on the Kolberg and the Dresden are incredibly weak. So I try not to fire them if I think it's at all likely I can penetrate with armour piercing. But the Wakatakes come back around, and it's kind of a foolish place to be since my whole team's like right here. Well, not really, just 3 cruisers and a battleship. but I've done 1200 damage with that broadside. And then, you know, 4 seconds later gets another one out and it misses, but 4 seconds later misses again. Just get so many chances. It doesn't actually matter if you miss a broadside, which you do quite a lot because it has quite bad firing angle, firing trajectories. So missing is fairly easy to do. But it doesn't matter because 4 seconds later you've got another broadside ready to go. Is the Wakataka going to come around the corner again? No, it looks like it's stopping. Why not try to torpedo me? Not a chance. Actually, I was just going to say I'm surprised the battleship hasn't killed the Wakatake, and then the battleship kills the Wakatake. So, my team's pretty solidly ahead in this game. We've sunk 7 enemy ships now, and we haven't lost any ourselves, so I'd say we're probably going to win this one. Just got to head down to the enemy base to, you know, catch up with all their camping battleships. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to talk a bit about, well, plunging fire and immunity zones, because, well, they're both actually kind of a myth that they exist in World of Warships. Well, to start off with, I'll say that, well, we'll start with immunity zones. Basically, the idea is that at long ranges, your armor-piercing shells will be falling almost vertically on the target and will punch straight through their deck armor. And at short ranges, your shells will be going horizontally and will punch straight through the belt armor. But at medium ranges, your armor-piercing shells will be falling at about a 45-ish degree angle. So it'll be angled towards both the deck and the belt armor, and it won't penetrate either of them. And I mean, this is actually kind of a myth because there are actually very few ships that fire at a high enough trajectory for plunging fire to actually ever be a thing. If you do get a Citadel at long range, it's most likely the ship you're firing has actually just got very thin deck armor as opposed to you're coming at a high angle. But just seeing that engagement with the St. Louis I had earlier, it got me thinking that maybe the Kolberg's actually a ship where plunging fire might be a thing. Which means that at long ranges you might be able to get really awesome penetration with these guns, even though they're quite small caliber. Just because they do fire at a very high angle, and they do actually have decent armor penetration for their size. So, well, I actually tested it out, and I'll show you the results after this game. But we've managed to catch up with the enemy campers. There's a Miyogi there. I'm aiming for the bow because the bow is quite thinly armoured, so I was hoping I'd do a bit of damage. But not so much. My high explosive shells still weren't quite thick enough to penetrate its bow armour. Come around the side here. Not for any particular reason, it's just I didn't want to run aground. And here's another Langley. Poor Langleys are far too slow to escape. And it looks like this one's going to try and torpedo me. So I'm turning away from its torpedo bombers as I continue to fire at it. And now would be a good time to mention that the Kolberg's actually a fairly fast ship. And these torpedoes are taking far too long to catch up with me, so I'm just going to turn out of their way. Which is a bit of a risky thing, but I did it safely. It's just, yeah, continuing going straight as I was and going in between the torpedoes would have taken a long time, and I want to get in close to these carriers to do some damage. Took out its engine, which is very painful in the Langley since it doesn't go very fast to start with. Switch focus to the Miyogi because it's actually a threat to me, and, well, turns out I managed to sink that Langley. I'm guessing someone must have landed a big hit on it and then my fire finished it off. And I'm getting a few bits of damage here, and by a few I mean I've done 200 or so far. But my shells, they're just not penetrating the deck armour and the belt armour of this Miyogi. Even though it's a battle cruiser, it still has decent armour, and it can at least protect against, you know, my 104mm guns, 105mm guns, whatever they are. So I'm really just hoping to start a fire, and that's how you're going to have to do your damage in this ship when you're fighting enemy battleships. Moving into the cap circle now, it's just the 2 Miyogis left. One's on the other side of the island from me, so I'm obviously going to shoot at this one, even though it's on full health, and there's not really much else in my team shooting at it at the moment. But that's alright, means I get to do all the damage by myself. Another thing about the Kolberg that's probably worth mentioning at this point is it gets no anti-aircraft guns, even fully upgraded. So even though there are just planes circling helplessly, like basically above my ship, I'm not going to get any aircraft kills here. I don't even have a machine gun to fire at them. And you can kind of see here again the weakness of the Kolberg's high explosive shells. They're just not doing any alpha damage. And so far at least we haven't started any fires. I swung back around to see if I could help my team finish off the other Myogi, but I'm not even going to get my guns on target in time for it to, well, to do any damage to it. So I just wasted a few, probably could have fired 3 broadsides off the Myogi there. So I lost a bit of damage there, just in checking what was happening with the rest of my team. I could of course have held down the right mouse button and just fired without looking, and I probably would have got a few hits. Oh, there we go, there's a fire. So I'm finally going to start doing some damage to this Myogi. Of course I'm not aiming particularly well at the moment, so the rest of my shots are missing. Looks like my allies are doing a fair bit of damage as well. And, oh, excuse me. Looks like I got a hit on target there, but again, no damage. Really, lots of people seem to like the Kolberg and the Dresden before it. But I think what people like is they get these massive hit counts. You see, I'm just about to pass the 200 mark. Well, I will be once my hits go up to the top, I think. But they don't seem to notice it doesn't actually do a lot of damage. Like, I'm guessing, I think these last 11 hits have probably done 400 damage. There, I didn't do any damage, but I took out a secondary gun. 198 damage. No damage at all from that broadside. Managed to start a fire, and the fire's going to do some damage for me. I think I took out another secondary gun there. I wasn't quite looking. A few hundred more damage. I also it's really zooming out there. I'm going, why isn't my ship turning? I zoom back and I go, it must be about to turn. I have told it to turn. It's still not turning. Then I look at the keyboard and realise that I'm pushing 3 as hard as I can to try and get it to turn. So, a bit awkward, but we'll start turning now. Unfortunately it's a bit late, so I missed my opportunity to do a bit more damage to that Myogi. Yeah, my team are going to sink it for me. So thanks team, I should have been actually turning instead of hitting 3. But anyway, 240 hits on enemies, sunk 3 enemy ships, started 11 fires. It's the best of my team, 1000 base experience, so all in all a pretty good game, but of those 240 hits did not do much damage at all. 28,000 with high explosive and 7,000 with armor piercing. You see, I did as much damage with my fires as I did with my high explosive, and that was just because I was firing at battleships so much. You just don't do any damage with them even with high explosive. So here is me testing immunity zones and plunging fire and the like in the Kolberg. So basically what I did is I just sat next to a St. Louis, which I turned the guns off. This is on the training room, of course. And I just fired away at the upper gun deck, or really the casemates, the secondary armament of the St. Louis. And then just recorded how much damage, average damage I did per hit. And I did repeat this for a St. Louis at every 500 meters. So 500 meters, 1 kilometer, 1.52, all the way up to 10.5-ish, maybe 10.9? No, I think just 10.5. And recorded the average damage per hit. And you should see a graph of this on the screen in front of you right now. You can see at very close ranges, as in a kilometer and below. Unpenetrating shells are absolutely awesome. They punch straight through the armour of the St. Louis and do a fair bit of damage, around the 375 mark per hit, so that's pretty good. And then at 1.5 it drops a lot, and that is kind of the beginning of the immunity zone for the St. Louis against the Kolberg. And that at about that range, my shells can no longer penetrate the belt armour, or the upper belt armour of the St. Louis, because of course I'm aiming for the secondary armament. I should also mention that that's kind of a weak spot on the St. Louis. So, well, immunity zones usually when people are talking about them are about penetrating the citadel of the St. Louis, but I don't think I can do that in this ship at basically any range. So I'm just talking about just, the chances of getting a penetrating ship into the penetrating shell into the ship at some point. So basically, at 1.5 kilometers range, it's actually very unlikely. Basically, my damage was a few penetrating shots, a lot of over penetrating shots, and a fair few bounces. And you see that actually basically continues all the way. So it makes it seem like they're actually, plunging fire isn't actually a thing in this ship, or at least there's no point where plunging fire at long ranges becomes as effective as horizontal fire at very close ranges. But there's one more thing to note about this, is that, well, it basically trends upwards from about 2 kilometers to 8-ish kilometers. There were 3 ranges where for some reason I did very poorly, but there's a lot of RNG in this if I didn't get the range, or it's really if I didn't get the angle to the enemy ship quite right, or my aim was a bit off, or I was just unlucky in RNG, which I think explains those 3 points a little down low. And basically that trending upwards is actually kind of the opposite of what you'd expect. I'd basically expect as long a range as my dispersion grew, I would expect more bounces just because I'm aiming for a weak point on the St. Louis, and I would expect more shells to drift away from that weak point and hit the thicker belt armour or whatever. Instead the opposite happens, which makes me think that basically plunging fire becomes slightly more effective at longer ranges. So it's kind of raising the average slightly just because you get slightly more penetrations at 8 kilometers than you do at, say, 4 kilometers. After 8 kilometers though, it seems to drop off, and that's probably the dispersion. As I said, you get quite a lot of misses and quite a lot of things just scraping off the side of the hull at that point, just scraping outside the belt armour and not doing any damage at all. I should also mention the very final point, where at 10.9 kilometers, is probably a bit skewed because I actually managed to get a citadel penetration at that range, where basically a lucky shot managed to go straight through the armoured deck and into the citadel and did, what must be 2,300 damage? If it wasn't for that shell, well, the average for 10.5 kilometers would have been well down with the, 10s and the 9.5, quite a bit lower than the 8 kilometers that we saw, well, basically lower than anything else there. So, not quite sure what to make of it. I mean, immunity zones in the Kolberg, it still kind of doesn't exist. Like, there's no point where armor-piercing shells become as effective as at long ranges as they are at close ranges, but it clearly gets slightly more effective as the range increases, just because your shells are coming into a steeper angle and they can probably just hit the deck armor slightly more flush and just have a slightly greater chance of penetrating. I'm not sure what to take away from this. Basically, I suppose the thing is, if you're within a kilometre of the St. Louis, fire armour piercing, and probably if you're between about 1 to 6 kilometres, it's probably actually a good idea to fire high explosive. And after that, maybe you could fire armour piercing again, just because statistically you're getting quite likely to get a penetration or two. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video or found it useful and informative, and I'll see you all next time.